The Stack, a podcast for IT and MSP professionals, with your host, David Papp.
Justin Brake, the general manager for OnServe, based out of Kingston, Ontario, joins us today. OnServe has a long history of over 30 years and is an MSP providing solutions from IT management, cybersecurity, IT projects, training, and much more. Welcome, Justin.
Thanks, David, for having us.
So what we're talking about here are different parts of the stack. So let's kind of look at, I'm imagining of your size that you guys have probably flushed out something pretty good when it comes to ticketing.
Ticketing, absolutely. We've gone through a couple of different iterations, but the primary goal that we were focused on was trying to find a ticketing system that would take the human intervention and the manual triggering process out of our workflows. Previous solutions that we had before really relied on somebody to remember to do a certain function, and if that didn't happen, the entire workflow would break. So we ended up actually partnering with ConnectWise on their managed platform as their PSA back in 2019, specifically around that function. So being able to look at a full blueprint and use something that's a little more closed loop and a little more accountability from an auditing standpoint, and that there was no guessing, or there was, as little as possible in the system that could fall between the cracks and wait for somebody to either spot check or rely on a fix.
Right on. So here's some questions I'm curious about from a workflow point of view. You've got ConnectWise in place. You've got technicians who go on site and or a lot of remote work nowadays. Do they have like a screen, a tablet, a device that's always checked in so that they're always checking their tickets and updating them and keeping them current? Or like, how does that work for workflow?
So when it comes to the offsite work, the guys do have their mobile phones, and some are utilizing the mobile access to that app. A lot of the times it's just been more for either contact details or address to be able to quickly map where they're going. So that really kind of came in handy. I can't say that we've really focused on real-time ticket updates and notes and time logs while they're in the field. We really rely on the guys to kind of stay focused on what they're dealing with when they're on site, and then of course being open to, hey, while you're here, I've got XYZ that needs to be addressed, and your half-hour session turns into an hour and a half pretty quick. But being customer focused, we try and at least alleviate all issues, and if they happen to be holding on some things because they want to see us in face, absolutely, we'll be there to do that. But a lot of the times the techs, when they're finished, they'll come back. They will take those opportunities to backfill their time, and if there are any additional expenses or things that they were dealing with while they were on site. But everything else from the day-to-day function, when they're in the queues and they're dealing with the ticket management, everything is expected to be as near real time as possible.
Fair enough. So on that note, then, if they're not always dealing with the ticketing system, how do you have them make sure that they're managing their time properly for reporting, and then possibly some procurement, right? If you've got some hardware that you're using and you need to reconcile all that at the end of the month to go and send your invoices out to your clients for assuming overages and, and the materials that you happen to use.
A lot of that, I think, comes back into pre-planning. So we've been very fortunate that there's not been a lot of instances where a tech is in the field and having to ad hoc equipment for anything they're particularly out. I mean, there may be an odd patch cord, there may be an odd display adapter, things like that. And luckily enough, we have, the ability to have them go through, purchase that, and expense that back. And when they're doing their time logs, they're able to add those expenses in at that time to make sure that we're actually passing that back to the customer and we're not leaving money on the table, or in, the world of we do it for service. not necessarily recognizing all that until somebody goes along with a credit card reconciliation and says, hey, what was that again? So yeah, we don't deal with a lot of that because we've been very proactive in nature. All of our on-sites, as I'd say 99% of the time, are going to be a pre-scheduled, pre-arranged. If we're doing a deployment, we've got everything in hand before we hit the road, just to be able to cut down on a lot of that. I think, just management and oversight, and making sure that, the guys have what they need when they go is the best approach.
Awesome. So have you automated, or is it still a manual process to get that information from ConnectWise at the end of the month into your billing system?
So that is an automated process. We did integration. We're actually using QuickBooks for our accounting. And yeah, every time that the invoices are flowing through, that information is being captured and pushed over. So there's no real disconnect that way, which has been a huge lifesaver.
You're listening to The Stack.
Special thanks to Pax8 for their support of The Stack. Pax8 empowers the modern MSP to buy, sell, and manage cloud products with automated provisioning, simplified billing, and free PSA integrations to more than 50 verified and vetted cloud service providers. Pax8 is ready to help you simplify your cloud business.
What's in your stack?
Oh, excellent. Right on. So tell us about the nature of your clients in general. I'm assuming most of them are managed services, fixed contracts. It's kind of a give and take when it comes to number of hours that you put in every month, because it allows you to be proactive as well as the reactive nature. Elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, so we basically kind of focus around three structures. So we'll have our introductory service that we usually refer to as like a security essentials. So we'll have some, endpoint monitoring, we'll have some spam, and preferably some type of perimeter protection, some type of a unified threat management device. Whether that's a sonic wall or a FortiNet or a WatchGuard, something that's at least doing more than just, am I allowed to come through this door? And that's basically it. We really want to make sure that we've got those solutions in place, that it's doing more analytic behavioral monitoring and trying to focus more on the zero trust idea. Tools are obviously expanding on what is available and what really is zero trust nowadays. But the basic concepts of just put a wall in front of it and prevent people from coming through isn't enough anymore. So the security essential side, that's basically our entry level, and it's very reactive in a help desk support situation. So those would all be billed, incidentally, but at least the ongoing patch management, workstation health reporting, and the base security level of what we would, require as an absolute minimum would be put in place for those. Then we'll have what we call sort of a shared IT services. So there's a lot of organizations that we deal with that are very small, medium business, 20 to 50 user shops would be our bread and butter. It's not overly complicated. There's not a lot of political red tape. And we're able to sort of position ourselves as a technology advisor rather than just another partner or another reseller that they come to when they want to buy something. So we really try and focus on who they are, what their business is, and then start aligning, what they've invested in and making sure that they can learn from our history and the mistakes that we made as we develop our stack and add new tools and things like that. So they're not just catching some webinar that looks like it's going to save their world, and then they throw a bunch of money and 6 months into it and realize that it did nothing of what they were expecting it to do. But the shared IT approach, that generally comes in where they already have somebody who's kind of doing the boots on the ground. Is it plugged in? Is it turned on? That kind of functionality, but they need to augment their staff for business continuity, for strategy, and trying to make sure that they're doing everything possible to let their technology support what they're trying to do with their business, versus just, I buy it, it breaks, I replace it when I need to replace kind of mentality, right? So that shared IT approach has gone well. The last piece to that obviously would be our full IT services. And that's more of what we're focused on as a managed service provider. So, having that all-in seat price, having us as their IT department to take care of every help desk and change management and technology that they have in place. So that's sort of the three tiers that we focus on. And then, of course, depending on the client and where they want to see themselves, there's some a la carte options in there. Managed services historically has been a long sales process and a long trust development process. So you don't always have the opportunity to just go in and throw a proposal at them and say, here's what it's going to cost, and let's just prove what we do. There's always some honeymoon period, I guess we'll call it, where you got to prove yourself from both sides and see how people interact. And once that trust is developed, that we tend not to have a lot of churn. There's a lot of clients that we've had for a very long time, from the small, medium, and large. It really comes down to if They can appreciate what we're doing. We can appreciate what they're doing. You get that collaboration and that continued momentum of communication and understanding that you're not just being thrown things last minute because, oh, I forgot I need to get something done. I guess I better give them a call.
So true. So true. You touched on several gems of information there. I love how you have to define the relationship, whether you're an augmentation of them or you are their IT department. And it's not possible for one person to know it all. So teaming up with an MSP such as yourselves really does give them access to a whole bunch of different areas of specialization that they can tap into. What we're running into a lot though, and I'm curious what you do in this situation is, do you have this notion of a report or a report card or a status or some kind of software you run or any kind of like item that the client gets every month to say, here's where you're at, here's what we're working on? Like, what does that communication look like from the client and yourselves? Because sometimes, let's face it, they're oblivious to all the things that we actually do for them. And that can cause some misunderstanding sometimes if they don't have an appreciation for what really goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In the years past, I mean, I think a lot of the MSPs, we all kind of had our standardization hit list, whether that was a spreadsheet, whether that was a Word document, but it was something that sort of said, these are the things that we need to have in place, whether that is infrastructure, security related or solution related. And you kind of, align them and said, yes, you meet these requirements, or yes, you have these things implemented. And that kind of at least helped them understand where they aligned and what the next steps were, and then to try and flush that out. And they usually would work with the account manager and the net admin kind of, the term virtual CIO or technical sales account manager, every month there's a different acronym or something that they're throwing out there. But at the end of the day, it's having the mindset to be able to take technical, align it to a business goal, and speak about that in a business language that makes sense, and get out of the jargon, get out of the weeds, and what is this going to do for me as a business? Is it going to save me money? Is it going to cost me money? If it's going to cost me money, is it saving me somewhere else? So rather than doing that old school approach, we ended up actually partnering with a group called True Methods. And I believe this is sort of a Kaseya kind of sideline, but the True Methods was a platform and a methodology that allowed us to implement what we call a My IT process. So we took all those standards, we knocked them up against, they have their own security analysts and groups that kind of put together a standardization or a maturity of your IT kind of thing. And we, took theirs, we blended in with ours, because again, there's never going to be one set of rules that everybody's going to have to follow. And everybody's going to do it slightly differently. But as long as we can put together this report card and then do an analysis and provide that report card back to the client, it makes things very easy to translate and to almost get microscopic at times and say, okay, these are the high priorities. This is where you're most at risk. So here's what some budget could look like for this. Here's some medium priorities. Here's some low. And then you progressively meet, review, and continue to show that progression. So to your point, when they outsource and it becomes a lot less transparent. They just see a bill. They don't necessarily know what or why or how. They just, I'm paying my utility bill. I'm paying my hydro bill. You're kind of now the same idea, right? I'm just paying a bill and we have a good relationship. When I call you, you're there. At the end of the day, I'm happy, but they don't necessarily see the value. And these are one of the big components that we implemented to really cement in what it is that we're trying to accomplish, why we're trying to get them to this level. And I keep referring to it as that maturity of IT. And then it makes that repeatable model so much easier. So it's not just the contract value. It's not just the monthly subscriptions and add-ons sometimes. It's being that technical advisor and helping them build that roadmap and say, okay, what are your biggest pain points? Like if there was something I could just pull off and you would never have to deal with again, what does that look like? And then you kind of look at the stack and you're like, okay, well, I've got solutions that could kind of do this and this. And there's so many different things that overlap nowadays as far as solutions. But at the end of the day, the client really doesn't need to know or care about the technology involved behind it. It's more of is this going to solve my problem? And does it fit within the budget and the process that we're trying to accomplish? And as long as you can continually make those reporting updates along to them, they feel they're seeing the progression, and you continue that, back and forth conversation, because it's so much easier to continue to add value and sell to get revenue to a client that you have already sold on and you have already continued to develop that relationship on. It's not like I'm cold calling and saying, hey, I've got some backup solution. Do you want to, take me up on this offer?
Love it. Love it. That is some solid information. I always love to wrap up my podcast interviews with a single tip, like a power tip. If there was one thing that people got out of it, actually, you know what? It doesn't even have to be something that you mentioned. It's just, if they were to walk away with one piece of advice, what would that be? Putting you on the spot.
That's okay. I think from my standpoint, outside of what you're investing in the technology, start getting training and awareness. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much money that you spend on security and technology and everything else, your end user will always be your weakest link. And if you can get them into some type of a cybersecurity awareness training, some desktop training, I know most MSPs, there's nothing that you hate more than getting that call and you're literally walking somebody through how to use OneDrive or how to use Outlook. Our job is to make sure it's working. Having the end users and getting some of that awareness is key. So if there is any opportunity as the one thing that you can do, start investing more in the staff and getting their training and their sort of awareness on these tools up, because it will save you exponentially.
That is solid advice. I agree 100% with what you're saying. I wish more companies invested much more in awareness and training for their staff, because it would go a long way.
Yeah, from both sides.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Justin, for joining us. And we are really appreciated having you on the show. Absolutely. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the MSP Stack Podcast. Remember, if you liked it, hit thumbs up. If you didn't like it, hit thumbs down twice. If you'd like to be on the show, head on over to the mspstack.com and click on the Be a Guest button. The Stack is made possible through the generous support of MSP Corp. What's in your stack?